see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Richard Levin. Thank you for joining me.
Great pleasure.
Yeah, so I want to just first start off by giving a little bit of introduction about you. And you're an internationally recognized physician, scientist, scholar, and cardiologist, as well as educator. And you're the new president and chief executive officer of the Arnold P. Gold Foundation, which has the tagline of working to keep the care in healthcare. So, by way of introduction, is there more you'd like to share about yourself and maybe your background?
I have been in academic medicine for all of my adult life, and after being a vice dean for education at NYU for quite a few years, I had the opportunity to go up to McGill in Montreal to become the dean of medicine. And I did that in 2006 to try and contribute as I could, but to take a close look at what the Canadians had done with their healthcare system and what the differences were. So I bring some of that perspective, though the differences, in fact, between our two healthcare systems are not as great as the cultural differences between the two countries. So that is probably a relevant issue in my background. And I've been on this job for 1 month. So I'm a rookie, but I'm dedicated and have been all of my life to the principles that the Gold Foundation espouses.
Well, I thought we could start off by getting a bit of background about the Gold Foundation, kind of how about the organization. And I've seen that in the press release that announced you taking over the CEO, becoming CEO, it was called as the it was a focus on empathy and compassion. As nature of doctor-patient relationship changes, compassion and empathy are essential. And that was the press release that announced you becoming a chief executive officer there. And so it's really framing the whole discussion around empathy and compassion. And so I just thought maybe you could kind of review, just share a little bit about the Gold Foundation, their history, and what is the interest in empathy within the organization?
Sure. It is the driving element of the organization and has been since its founding, which is coming up on 25 years. About that time, a famous pediatric neurologist, Arnold P. Gold, who gave his name to the foundation, noticed that he was complaining more and more about the swing of the pendulum toward the technocratic, the technological, and felt that it was crowding out this fundamental quality that has been present in Western medicine for 2,400 years, since Hippocrates walked on the island of Kos in the Aegean and taught in small group teaching, which it took us 2,000 years to come back to, fundamental principles about the importance of the doctor as fiduciary for the individual patient, whatever patient was under his or her care at the time, and the elements of caring for patients, the difficulties that patients had in expressing themselves fully in those days, inviting a doctor into their homes, and the complexities of the doctor-patient relationship as the base, the structure on which scientific medicine might actually be constructed. It's remarkable that he had all of this in mind. He's one of the great geniuses of human history. And Arnold noticed that he was complaining more and more, and was at a cocktail party at which he was the only physician. And one of the guests began to talk about a recent experience with a physician, an awful story. And that gave permission to everyone else around the table to tell their stories. And within 24 hours, he had spoken to his wife, Sandra, who is the co-founder with Arnold of this foundation. And Sandra characteristically said, "Arnold, look, you've been complaining about this for a long time. Why don't you do something or shut up?" And within another day, Arnold had put together a board, had made an arrangement with the dean at Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City, where he was and is a faculty member, to be a partner, to allow Columbia to be a laboratory for the things that Arnold had in mind for the demonstration of the swing of that pendulum and opportunities to insert humanism back into the practice of medicine. And that was 25 years ago, and they chose, I think, a brilliant approach, which was to invent rituals that would be of such significance that they would serve medical students throughout their entire lives as practicing physicians. And they invented the white coat ceremony. It has been so successful that, of course, it has now many fathers and mothers. Many people claim to have invented this, but it's an opportunity in the very beginning of a first-year student's life to be cloaked, as the phrase goes, by a senior empathic faculty member, someone well respected by the community of scholars in science or humanism or philosophy, psychiatry, whatever, in which the students either recite the Hippocratic Oath or an oath that they have invented themselves that might be more contemporaneous, and at which they are charged with the very specific responsibilities of caring for the patient as the central metaphor and the central component of the healthcare system. Everything else is secondary, and given to understand that that is a responsibility that separates them from everybody else in their work, and that is fundamental to having a good healthcare system and an appropriate patient-physician relationship.
So if I hear this correctly, it was that the healthcare has moved towards technology and maybe distancing themselves from the patient, and he saw that the troubles people were having, the doctors were having with connecting or the experience of the patient, and so he really wanted to bring in the humanism back into healthcare and in the doctor-patient relationship. And so the Gold Foundation is working towards fostering this humanistic quality in healthcare, and doing it through, it looks like a wide variety of different ways. One is like through ritual, and maybe there's a lot of other kind of projects around that.
Yeah, that was the first, and it's been wildly successful for outsiders, in essence, to come in and recommend to academic medics how to do something is really unheard of. And in these 25 years, they're up to 96% of all medical schools in North America. I should say the United States and Canada, and another 10 countries internationally. So the White Coat Ceremony, there's something called the National Humanism Honor Society, which now has 14,000 members, in which students, faculty, are elected by their peers as exemplary in the qualities of humanism that have been observed by their colleagues during the years. And so it's become a great honor to be so elected. And this now exists in 102 chapters at medical schools throughout the United States and Canada. And then recently a research institute was added, cited virtually throughout a variety of laboratories, but centered in Boston, with a member of the Harvard Medical School faculty. And the purpose of the Research Institute is to itself perform and to fund research that will get at the question of how humanism actually has a positive effect, a benefit for patients and the healthcare system. And this gets us to an extraordinary moment in the history of medicine. Because as you may have seen in the press last week, there was a lot of hullabaloo about a discovery related to DNA. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
No. So to put it succinctly and as sharply as I can, back in the previous century, in the 1990s, there was a focus on decoding the human genome. And there was a race to do that. A genome is the entire bulk of DNA in each of our cells as humans. And it was felt that when we knew the sequence of the 100,000 genes, that was a prediction, in the human genome, and could see where there were mutations, letters of the code that were off, we would understand a lot more about disease and be much more effective as physicians and as a healthcare system. A fellow named Craig Venter at Celera, a company that he started just to do this job, just to read out the human genome, and the NIH-led consortium of physicians under Francis Collins basically ultimately came to the genome together at the same moment, and at a wonderful press conference, I guess in 2002, announced that they had done it. Something remarkable happened. There weren't 100,000 genes. And everyone had predicted that in order to build a human, you needed about 100,000 to explain all of our traits and quirks. There were only about 27,000. Now, during this time, DNA had been divided into two segments, things called introns for intervening sequences, and things called exons, that's where the genes are. And the introns were thought to be junk DNA. Now, as people thought about this for a couple of decades, you know, nothing in biology allows for waste. That's not how evolution worked. So the idea that most of the genome was junk began to be questioned. And last week, 8 papers were published simultaneously in 3 journals that describe the fact that the junk DNA, in fact, has small portions of non-genes that code for everything, code for the speed of development, code for the color of our eyes, the color of our hair, whether we're going to be bald, whether we're going to be bold, and the field that is studying whether you can change the genes and those substances between the genes, called epigenetics, has determined that in your lifetime, experiences that you have, generally major events, whether good or bad, turn genetic switches on or off, so that the heritage of your genes is not fixed. It can be modified by your environmental experience. So it's not nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture. And the changes that occur in your genes can actually be passed on to your offspring and to their offspring. This is a revolution in modern understanding of genetics. And
well, if I can just yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to tie this now back to where we started. If in a moment of crisis, which is not uncommon for the doctor-patient relationship, the doctor can use humanism to provide assurance, hope, care, warmth, love to the patient, it can actually change genetic switches that in turn, if the patient is of childbearing age, can be passed on to the next generation. So what I'm suggesting, Edwin, is that we now have a common final pathway. There is biology that actually explains empathy and its importance in the human interaction on the patient-physician level. And that's what the Research Institute is going to study.
Okay, so it's that we have the biology of the genes, and then it's the question of nature or nurture. It's actually both.
Yes.
So if we have a culture of empathy, if we create, which is kind of what I'm working on here, is if we create a culture of empathy, it's actually going to, and we have empathic child rearing throughout our lifetimes. We have social structures that nurture empathy, that it will affect our genes, our biology, and the science is showing kind of the relationship between those different factors, the nature and the nurture.
Precisely. You're a wonderful student. Were you good in school?
I was kind of bored by it, and I got out of high school in 3 years and went traveling around the world for 10 years. So the other part is, how did the Gold Foundation move from just general humanism to, there seems to be a focus on empathy, and how did they move to that, the importance of empathy as kind of one of the values that you're kind of working on supporting?
Well, as I say, it really has been there in the teaching of medicine for millennia. We focus on Western medicine, with the beginning being Hippocrates, but in India, in the Middle East, in China, there had been this concept of the importance of a unique relationship between physicians and patients, probably for 5,000 years. And in those early teachings is the discussion and the basis for suggesting that empathy is one of the primary characteristics of humanism, which in turn, as our board chair, Jordan Cohen, has said, animates professionalism. So that professionalism is a cold term without the animus of empathy and humanism. And so when the foundation was begun, these very concepts were incorporated into what it was trying to do. And there's an acronym that the foundation has, which is IE Cares. And do we have that? So that is integrity, empathy, compassion, altruism, excellence, and respect as the key values of humanistic medical practice. So it was there from the beginning.
Do you see your work connected to a larger humanist movement? There's a move, humanism within society. Is you're part of that larger movement?
The foundation was begun with this notion of the importance of this unique interaction, this very intimate, critical interaction at a time often of crisis in a patient's life. But in fact, it is viewed now as part of the larger movement of humanism and its capacity to reorient and correct some of the problems we have developed. I'm sure you have great expertise in this, but you can ask the question, how could we possibly have gotten into the trouble that arose from the financial markets creating instruments that were so complicated that they in fact could not be understood by their inventors, leading to the financial crisis and the prime rate catastrophe for mortgages. What were the business schools teaching their students about the importance of ethics, humanism, empathy? And does there necessarily need to be some sort of separation between people who crunch numbers and people who create art? And the doctor who for centuries has been taught that medicine is both an art and a science, caught somewhere in between and watching that pendulum swing back and forth. So yes, indeed, this is part of a larger movement to try and correct where we've gone wrong.
So it's bringing the value of empathy to all parts of society, bringing empathy and compassion into the healthcare, but maybe bringing it into the financial institutions as well. It's kind of really a larger societal kind of question here.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
And one of the things I saw that you're doing is you're holding a conference. You have your biennial 2012 Building on a Decade of Humanism in Action conference coming up in October 4th through 6th in Rosemont, Chicago, Illinois. And I noticed one of the keynotes is a talk on how do we educate physicians to be skilled in empathy and compassion by William Mobley, MD, PhD. So it's part of your conference is kind of the
Yeah,
exploration of empathy and compassion.
yeah. So it turns out that empathy can be taught. It is not just a genetic trait. You aren't either born with it or not. One of the very interesting investigators in this area is a woman named Helen Reese, who in fact has been funded by the Gold Foundation. And she's a neurobiologist, psychiatrist at Harvard, who has been studying the structures in the brain, in particular, a kind of nerve cell called a mirror neuron, which exists in several locations within the brain. And when you do a functional scan of the brain, these are the areas that light up when there is an empathic relationship going on. And she and others developed ways to study this. She then went on to ask the question, well, you know, we beat up residents pretty well. We make them go without sleep for days. We tell them that they have to develop some distance in order to be able to take care of patients who are in pain and for whom we may make the pain worse in order to make them better. And one of the approaches to that has been this distancing, this decathexis, lack of relationship, lack of empathy. And it's an error. We view it as an error to have allowed it to go that far. So she did a study in which they took two groups of residents assigned randomly. One group went through normally. Another group had just 3 hourly sessions on the importance of empathy to the patient's well-being, the family's well-being, the community's well-being around a patient in a specific disease state. And developed a means of assaying what the effects were. And she was able to demonstrate that, yes, indeed, you could improve scores of empathy by brief interventions, simple interventions, and that those patients were better having had doctors with a higher empathy score.
Yeah, I had interviewed Helen as well, so it was really
You did?
wonderful. Yeah, for like an
Yeah.
hour. Really, she talked about her process. So we're bringing in the science. The science then is basically showing that when we have that empathic connection with our doctor, that it's actually nurturing, helping the healing process. Then. And
Yes.
there are ways of teaching empathy. You can actually create an empathic curriculum, empathic intervention, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's what the next 10 years has to focus on. It's what the foundation will try and do, working with medical schools to develop new approaches that allow this to happen. And you know, we've been able today in this brief time to talk about a whole cascade of biologic and genetic events that can be affected by empathy. And it's not just good for the patient and the system, it's also good for the doc. It's, I think, an important component that has always been there, emphasized to varying degrees over thousands of years, and now being highlighted by the Gold Foundation.
I've been tracking the development of empathy within the healthcare as well. Kind of been watching it, and I noticed that the Cleveland Clinic has been a leader in this area. That they used to have what they called a chief empathy officer, which now I think they call the person a chief experience officer. So they've really been developing something called person-centered care, which is really about being empathic, really feeling what's the experience of the patient as they move through the system. Are you involved in that in some way in the Cleveland Clinic's work or in?
I am not sure whether the Gold Foundation is specifically involved in that. I know about that work, and there are a number of systems, medical schools, academic health centers that have taken the step of appointing someone called a chief officer of X, Y, or Z, including empathy, that tries to make certain that this critical area is focused on. Same way that there are now chief safety officers for hospitals, having identified, and they're often physicians, physicians with PhDs who know something in depth about statistics, because of the difficulty that comes with the complexity of modern healthcare in the hospital environment, and the fact that mistakes can be made. Wonderful article by Atul Gawande in the New Yorker a couple of weeks ago, stemming from his experience, at least as he describes it, at a cheesecake factory with his kids, and how the Cheesecake Factory, to get where it is, had to focus on efficiency, a good quality product at a lower price, and asks whether medicine couldn't do something similar, and make certain that just as every stage of the meal being developed by the chef in the kitchen was watched over by a computer system that described what the expectations were for that stage in the preparation, why there couldn't be similar activities in the hospital, to make certain that we didn't make mistakes. I would consider that a kind of empathy.
Mm-hmm. So really tracking the patient and what their experience is through the process.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
in a much tighter and more coordinated way than we have been able to do.
Well, I'm looking, it looks like there's within the healthcare that there is a empathy and compassion movement. There's which is what you're part of and helping to nurture, is really to create kind of an environment of empathy within the whole healthcare system. Would you say that's accurate? And that's kind of really what you're trying to do?
Absolutely, and there are many components to this. Humanism, empathy is a component of humanism. Humanism is a component of professionalism. There is a movement to remember that when a doctor takes a patient's history, at least one story is being told. And so the importance of narrative in medicine is also coming to the fore. That's part of this whole, and has been pushed forward by a professor at Columbia named Rita Charon. I don't know if you've interviewed her.
No, not yet. So it's by people being able to share their stories, it's a way for the doctor to be able to connect with them, or vice versa, perhaps too. That storytelling is a great way for empathy to happen, the empathic
Yes.
connection.
Yes. In fact, we teach that you have to be sensitive enough. You have to be sufficiently empathic that you can be aware of the fact that the real story being told may not be in the narrative that the patient is spinning, but in fact is hidden because it is often so difficult for the patient to come out and describe something which is socially or biologically embarrassing or unacceptable. And no one teaches us how to be good patients. It's something that may happen, but in listening intently to the words, it's possible to pick up the real story, which may be hidden.
So
And
that's
that's the importance of empathy in the narrative as listener and teller.
So the Gold Foundation is holding conferences. It's funding research. It's supporting storytelling for doctors' work. Where do you see? I mean, you're the new CEO. Where do you see the work kind of going? What direction are you kind of envisioning? Where are the focal points there for your work?
I think disparate ones, which will ultimately come together. But we want very much to be involved in describing there is a biological basis for empathy, that there is a genetic basis, and that one can modify in a single lifetime the capacity to be a humanist as a physician on the one hand, and we also want to develop this core, this army of physicians for whom it has been important at some point in their lives. So the meeting that you referred to at the beginning of October is the 5th biennial meeting of the Gold Humanism Honor Society, which is this national organization which recognizes doctors by other doctors who know by observation that their care is humanistic and has the quality of empathy. And we want that group to grow and have an opportunity to inform the healthcare system, which is under such pressure as it is changed by the Affordable Care Act and whatever legislation will follow that gives more people the opportunity to be in the system as patients, that is, approaches universal health care, and will allow a growing support for physicians who feel these unique pressures, unique in the history of medicine, to become more efficient, to cut down on the length of time that they spend with patients that raise the bottom line. And, it's that last question, the subtle and difficult question, that may have recognized the hidden meaning of the patient's narrative, that may be the key to the case or the illness. And if we allow the system to go too far, some would argue that it has already. There's no time for that last question, and it's the most important question.
Well, the first part was you seemed very excited about the nature and nurture science part, that's really a real key that you're wanting to kind of further that research. And then the second part seems to be the networking, getting doctors together, or the people in the medical field together who are already valuing the empathy, the compassion, and the humanism, and getting them to network together to kind of move that forward.
I was telling a story about Vannevar Bush and the fact that the government poured tremendous resources into the research and development field during World War II. And Vannevar Bush described a system in which there was fundamental research that was not necessarily driven by the need to make a useful product in the real world, and there was applied research, that kind of duality, that binary system, and it has been applied to many things in medical research as well. A hope is that we can diminish this division between the social and the biological, the applied and the fundamental, as knowledge and the tools for investigation have improved. We have an opportunity to meld them together so that it's just one axis. It asks fundamental questions, but the answers result in inventions, whether conceptual or hardware, that help the patient with living better lives.
Well, we've talked about the foundation, and I wanted to also hear a little bit about you personally, a little bit about yourself and how you view and experience empathy. And I find it's good to kind of start with just finding out what your most important value in your life is personally for you.
Well, in work, because I'm going to leave family as my most important value. But in work, I would say it is excellence. So I have been, in most of my life, passionate about the value of education and its capacity to allow full human potential, which we're certainly far from. And it can only allow that state yet to be achieved when education is available to everyone and is truly of excellent quality. The search for excellence is a difficult one. It's a 24/7 job. There are many people who seek excellence, and um, demanding it makes it difficult at times for students and colleagues, but it's essential to reach a point of full human potential. So I think of all the values, I think that's the most important in my life.
Hmm. So the first one was kind of in general was family, the importance of family, and
Yes,
then it's excellence and education, or the
I would
other.
I would say that those two are separate. Um, and if there's another, it's biology.
Well, before we get too many values there, what do you see as the relationship of those values to empathy? Because that's really what the focus of these dialogues is about how do we nurture empathy and compassion within society. And I'm always interested in how people relate their most important values to empathy. So if you were to see, how does empathy for you relate to family?
Well, um, you know, it's all one, because I'm a I'm a biologist. I'm almost a preacher of biology. The importance of empathy among the members of a small or extended family is critical. There's this fantastic phrase in Schindler's List, Spielberg's epic, fantastic movie, which is from the Hebrew oral tradition, and it's the moment when Schindler is leaving the people that he saved during the Holocaust, and he said he hadn't done enough, and the response was from the Talmud: "He who saves one life saves the world entire." And it's a puzzling statement how you by saving one life you could save the entire world. But if you think about it in the terms we've been discussing, in terms of a culture of empathy, and what we now know about biology as a final common pathway, if you treat others as you would have them treat you, if you as a doctor treat your patients as you would like to be treated by a physician, we create this condition of empathy which modifies the genes and creates a state of wellness, of goodness, which is actually transmissible to the next generations. So I view these values as allowing the development of a better condition. And I think the interpretation of that phrase as metaphor is simply that by changing one life for the better, you actually can affect a huge cohort of people, maybe the whole world. That's what I think.
Yeah, so it's just like the doctor, if they can really connect with one patient to just see that as the world, that you're changing the world, and it really brings your presence maybe to that one person
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly.
And how about the excellence part? I mean, for me, I would translate excellence relates to empathy in the sense that the more deeply we can empathize with others and put ourselves in their shoes and create that connection, that is, for me, would be personally what excellence would be about, is that sense of creating an ever deeper connection. But I'm wondering from your point of view, what are you seeing excellence as meaning?
It means that I don't quite see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Excellence allows the possibility of a thorough education. And what does education accomplish? It allows us to imagine ourselves in someone else's condition. And it is only an imagining. It's a fiction. And especially in disease, you can't ever experience what another individual is experiencing. But with an excellent education, you can come very close to appreciating what that patient, that individual is experiencing, and in so doing, connect with someone whom otherwise might continue to exist as other, as enemy, as foe, and with education come to recognize that they're part of the family.
Mm-hmm. So it's a special type of education. It's an education that connects us with others instead of maybe building boundaries and judgments and demonization.
I would say that one of the major goals of an excellent education is this, that it's not a special kind of education, but is in fact a byproduct of education itself.
The other thing I like to ask people about is their own personal metaphors of empathy. Like empathy is often described as standing in someone as a metaphor, standing in someone else's shoes and looking through someone else's eyes. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia because it kind of opens the door for me emotional experientially to the life of others and it enriches my life. So from that sense, it's like a cornucopia. I'm wondering from your own imagination if you have a metaphor for empathy and or compassion that's kind of like your own creative, tapping into your own creative image making process.
Yeah, Edwin, I wish I did. I don't think I have an apt metaphor for this. I like the description which I've read, in which empathy is described as the capacity of the artist, the painter, the composer, the writer, to appear to capture a human thought or emotion so well that as you experience it, you believe you are experiencing what the inventor of that work what was actually experiencing. So it's an intensity of connection that is very difficult to achieve. That's as close as I come, but it's not mine.
Oh, well, that is a metaphor of the artist. You know, the empathy is like an artist connecting deeply and representing. And in fact, they're kind of mirroring it, aren't they? It's like they're
Yeah.
seeing something and they are embodying it so well that they are able to reflect it back
Yeah.
in such depth that, they're able to share that experience even with others then. So there's a great empathic connection within that art then.
Yeah, I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
as
look,
I say, not mine.
yeah, it's not yours, but it's what came to mind. That's good though. That works. So any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Anything that we haven't kind of covered yet that you'd like to share? about empathy and compassion and in your work? And
I think the Golds were very courageous in establishing this foundation and asking the establishment in medicine to accept that we needed to focus on humanism, on these characteristics that I've described drives the foundation. That they are heroic in this sense, and I think each of us, you in helping establish a culture of empathy, anyone who steps out of the comfort zone to challenge and to ask that we be better, that we search for that excellence, that we understand the other as well as we understand ourselves. If we encourage that, we'll get through some of the difficulties that we're facing now.
well, great. With that, then I'll bring the conversation to a close. I'm really grateful for you taking the time, Rich, to share your experience with and information about the Gold Foundation, and as well as sharing some of your own personal stories and insights around empathy and compassion. So I hope we can keep the dialogue going, and maybe do some panels. I talked to Helen about doing some online panels like this, and she was open for doing that. And
I think it's a great idea. I wish you the best of luck in your work, and thank you for a very enjoyable hour.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
Till next
Bye
time.
now.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.